Imagine the following scene. A black limousine cuts through the city during a downpour, while outside, a little girl of only 7, completely covered in mud and shivering with cold, faces the window with eyes full of hope and fear. She shouldn't be here. But hunger, loneliness, and longing for a mother who's already gone don't leave her any other choice. Without thinking twice, Clara knocks on the window, begging for a chance, any chance. On the other side, sitting on the leather seat, is Marcelo Bastos, a millionaire used to ignoring requests like this, with the icy gaze of someone who thinks nothing can surprise him. He tries not to look until he notices what's in her hands, a small old music box, engraved with words that make everything stop for a moment. To my daughter, with eternal love. The same gift he once gave before his own daughter vanished. What will she do now? What if this girl is? You won't believe what happens next. Keep watching to see how one knock on a window changed the destinies of 2 lives forever. The rain is coming down in that way that makes you think it'll never stop. It hammers the rooftops, clangs against trash cans, and splashes across the backs of hurried people as they dart across the street, trying to escape the freezing water, soaking everything. On the sidewalk, in front of a closed shop, stands Clara. She's 7, though you'd think she was younger just by looking at her. Skinny, small, dark tangled hair plastered to her forehead and cheeks, smeared with mud. The dress she's wearing can't be hers. It must have belonged to some other child, bigger or about her size. But now it's so dirty, sticking to her legs, it looks more like a torn nightgown. Clara hugs herself. With her left hand, she clutches a tiny box to her chest, wrapped in a ratty old piece of plastic, trying to keep it dry. Her other arm is wrapped around her stomach, as if holding tight could make the hunger hurt any less. No one really notices, but she tries to hide her shivering. The cold has sunk deep. Barefoot, she feels every puddle, every pebble, every hard edge of the asphalt like a pinch. The city is nothing but noise and rush. Cars spray up dirty water, leaving grime hanging in the air. Horns blare more impatiently than usual, maybe because no one wants to be out on the street right now, least of all a child. But Clara is, and her eyes jump from face to face, always searching, always hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone will stop and ask if she's okay. But no, nobody stops. Nobody asks. She crouches in a corner of a shop window, a little warmth from the light inside, but the store's already closed. She leans her forehead on her knees, eyes shut, breathing in the scent of wet things, of a street that never sleeps. A black car speeds by, splattering her chin with even more water, making her shiver. Still, no one looks. The sound of the rain is loud enough to feel in your chest, as if every drop was tapping a slow rhythm straight through her. But the emptiness inside is even bigger. It's like this strange silence, because even with everything so busy, no one sees her there, trying not to cry. But the longing hurts, you know? It's like she's carrying a memory, her mother's face, the smell of her hug, and the way she whispered that everything would be okay. But her mother left before her time, all of a sudden, and the promise that things would work out vanished with her. Since then, Clara's learned that asking for things is the hardest part. Hardest is telling herself, hold on. Harder still when your stomach's growling and fighting with your heart, because there's no way, no bread, no arms to hold you. People hurry by, their umbrellas angled away from her. Other people's eyes don't even meet hers for a split second. A well-dressed woman passes by talking on the phone, not even noticing Clara's bare foot almost touching her shoe. A man in a suit turns up his collar and crosses to the other side of the street, just so he won't get too close. Clara feels her chest tighten. For a moment, she squeezes her eyes shut, trying to picture all this as just a bad dream. But the sharp smell of wet trash and her soaked clothes won't let her forget it's real. She thinks about her mother almost all the time. Remembers when there was a home, food, a sense of safety. It was cramped, but they were together. Now, when she feels like saying her mother's name out loud, she just swallows hard. Even the name seems to hurt. But she grips that little box secreted to her chest. It was the last thing her mother gave her, always telling her to listen to the tune whenever she missed her. But it's been a long time since the box played properly. The key's almost broken, and the music sounds as tired as she feels. The wind carries laughter from kids playing across the street, through the window of a lit apartment. Clara closes her eyes again, as if that only makes the longing worse. The rain falls harder now. Thick drops. The sky heavy and dark. Everyone running for shelter, everyone except her. She tries to stand but stumbles a bit, her knee smacking the pavement. She never lets go of the box. She sits there for a while, looking at the world as if it belonged to someone else. For a second, she nearly gives up. But then she remembers her mother's saying, "Never let go of what makes your heart happy, my girl." And the box was that. Her only thing. Rain runs down her face, mixing mud on her forehead with tears she pretends not to feel. She's tired, but doesn't let herself cry, forcing herself not to seem weak. The cold hangs on her shoulders like a heavy coat she can't take off. Then, Clara's empty stomach rumbles again. She slips her free hand into the torn dress pocket, but there's nothing. Not even a coin, not a crumb of stale bread. She squeezes the music box again, like maybe it can feed her soul. She has to keep moving. She has to find something, someone kinder, maybe a forgotten scrap of bread. She stands slowly, body aching, and moves on down the wet sidewalk, crossing a city that never really sees her. As she walks, she shields the box from wind and water, knowing if she loses this, she loses everything. Night falls, darker, colder, and Clara disappears into the hurried crowd, every step an effort, every hope a tiny seed inside her, waiting for a miracle that maybe will never come. That afternoon, the rain seemed determined to wash the whole city clean. Heavy drops fell, bouncing off the roofs, making little puddles grow fast along the sidewalks. Clara walked slowly, cold water trickling down her back into her thin, dirty clothes. Her hair stuck to her forehead and cheeks, streaked with mud. Each step felt heavy, her feet red with cold, but still she kept going. Her stomach no longer growled, it just ached with hunger. Empty of everything but sorrow. Clara wiped her eyes with her sleeve, which stank and was drenched. She stared ahead, trying not to think of her mother. It made the pain throb worse. Now, it was just her and the street, always cold, always in a rush. She stopped in front of a bakery. In the window, sweet rolls and soft loaves, a chicken pie. For a moment, Clara just looked, forehead pressed against the steamed-up glass. Inside, the warm smell of bread filled the room. Outside, she felt only the wind, a cold drop running down her neck. She took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and walked in. People at the counter glanced at her, then went back to their conversations or phones. A woman edged away, clutching her purse as if Clara might steal it. An older man behind the counter didn't even really look at her. Clara walked up to him, her voice tiny, almost swallowed by the noise. "Sir, do you maybe have some bread left?" He looked up, eyes scanning her from head to toe. His face closed up, saying nothing for a second. Then he cut off her hope with a curt, flat, "No," and went back to counting money, fixing loaves. Clara felt her face burn with shame. She backed away, staring at her own feet, trying to slip out without drawing any more attention. A little boy sitting with his mother pointed at her, loud. "Look, Mom, she's dirty." The woman pulled him close and whispered something, shooting Clara a look. Outside, the rain came down harder. Clara stood for a moment under the awning, trembling. She stared back inside the bakery. Inside, people laughed, warmed themselves, ate cake. She felt a tear merge with the rain. But there was no time for sadness. Hunger drowned out everything. Clara walked on, kicking an empty can, passing the butcher line. She paused in front of another restaurant. The smell of beans and fried rice wafted from the window. Clara tried to get close to a woman leaving with a food package. "Ma'am, do you have any bread or—" The woman didn't stop. Looked at Clara like she was trash on the sidewalk. Hurried, lips tight, eyes hard. Clara stared at her own hands, caked with dirt. To everyone, she was only filth, as if that was all she could ever be. At every door, it was the same silent no, sometimes just a look, sometimes not even that. She tried again, asking a man chewing a pastry under a shop awning. He pretended the rain was too loud to hear her, turned his face away. Clara kept walking, water up to her ankles, cold wind brushing her thin skin. She passed a dog, skinny as her, snuffling for scraps near a trash can. She wanted to pet him, but he growled in fright. No one trusted anyone around here. Not even the cars would stop. One driver honked when she tried to cross quickly. Another rolled up his window and glared. Fear or disgust, Clara couldn't tell anymore. Sometimes she almost wished they'd shout at her. The silence, now that really hurt. She hugged herself tighter, trying to get a bit warmer. Almost stumbled, but caught herself on a lamp post. She looked around. No one saw, no one called out, no one noticed. It felt like she was fading, minute by minute, like she could become nothing more than another puddle of mud. Another bakery. Raindrops streaked down the glass. Clara hesitated, too tired. But she went in anyway. Inside, a woman in an apron was sweeping. She just looked worn out, not necessarily angry. Clara swallowed her tears and tried again, hope flickering weakly. "Miss, do you have any old bread? Anything at all?" The woman glanced up, face unreadable. She shook her head slowly. That was it. She went back to sweeping, pushing the dirt toward the door like she'd sweep Clara out too. Clara left slowly, eyes stinging. She missed her mother so much it made her chest heavy. She imagined her voice saying tomorrow would be better, that there were still good people left. But no one was there to hold her hand now. Her old jeans clung to her legs, water dripping into her ripped sneakers. The streets even colder in the rain now. The sky is dark, almost night. People hurry past, sheltered by umbrellas, heavy coats, backpacks, headphones. She wanted to lie down right there, close her eyes, let the water wash it all away. But something inside her wouldn't let her. Maybe it was hope, stubbornness, or just the memory of her mother saying, "We don't give up, my darling. Never." Clara steadied herself on the post again, breathing deep. She looked down at her small hands, so dirty, so thin, clutching that music box in her coat pocket even tighter. It was the only piece of her mom she had left. The only one. She moved on, head down, shoes soaked, keeping to the edges. She wouldn't stop. The city might not see, the rain might pour, but Clara would keep trying. Even if it was just to hold on to that thin strand of hope. Her heart squeezed tight with loneliness, but still beat strong. And so she kept walking, slowly, to the next place, the next request, in a world that never seems to listen. The rain thickens on the glass, running in crooked lines that blur the streetlights. Parked at the red light, the black car gleams under the water, like some big silent animal, its engine humming quietly, as if it doesn't want to attract attention out here in the city's cold. Inside the limo, it's dry, warm, the scent of new leather and expensive cologne. Marcelo Bastos stares at his phone screen, fingers swiping nervously through messages he isn't really answering. The gold watch on his wrist ticks out a tempo only he seems to notice, impatient. He runs a hand through his almost gray hair, stare fixed on the clogged traffic, jaw set, the look of a man who's always known exactly what he wants. Outside, Clara huddles behind a bus stop sign, right at the edge of the awning. The dress that used to be pink is colorless now, stuck to her legs with mud. The cold wind cuts straight through the fabric, makes her arms tremble. Her open mouth lets out a small puff of white breath, a sign of the empty ache in her stomach and the chill soaking into her soul. She squeezes the music box in her hand. It feels heavy. It's all she has left in the world that's still beautiful, even if it's dirty. The red light stacks car after car in traffic. Clean people, windows up, radios on. Some don't even glance around. Others turn away from the lost gaze of whoever's stuck on the outside. Clara edges closer, half walking, half sliding along the curb. Her one shoe, the other lost to a pothole in the park last week, squelches with every step on the sidewalk. The contrast hits you in the face. The shiny, sealed, untouchable car and the invisible girl outside. Marcelo doesn't notice her at first. He's irritated, waiting for that important call. The driver behind the wheel relishes the silence. Only the sound of the wipers breaking the rhythm of the rain fills the plush car. For Clara, that sound is a strange music, nothing like the tune in her music box. Everything feels so far away it hurts. Clara comes close to the car, at the side window, staring at the dark glass. She sees her own reflection, hair far from neat, cheeks streaked with dried mud, eyes deep and red. For a second, she almost gives up. She imagines what they'll say, if someone will shout at her, or just look right through her like everyone else. But she stays, still, weighing out if courage really exists, or if it's just desperation pushing her forward. Marcelo presses his phone again, sighs, shuts his eyelids tight. There's a weight heavier than the bad day, a hollow he can't name, a tiredness mixed with impatience. In his world, nothing should surprise him. He's used to fixing everything with a phone call, a bank transfer, without looking at the person who's asking. He hates surprises. His watch glints when the red light hits the metal. A small detail, but it makes everything fit together in that world that feels so far from the cold dripping across the girl's face outside. Out on the avenue, barely anyone remains. Newspaper sellers shrink under their stand's awnings. A stray dog shakes off wet fur, trying to get into the closed bakery. When Clara presses her cold hand against the car's metal, time seems to freeze for half a second, as if even the cars around are holding their breath. The divide between the two worlds has never been so clear. Marcelo, in his fortress of comfort, hardly senses the heavy air outside. He doesn't know that if he rolls down the window, he'll get a whiff of street, old bread, gasoline, soaked clothes. Clara peeks in again, searching for a face, a reaction. The tinted window only gives back a shadow, but she imagines someone real. Not the kind of rich guy from TV, but someone who'd at least listen before saying no. A strange heat rises in her cheeks, maybe shame, maybe hope. She isn't sure. She holds the music box tight to her chest, heart beating so fast it feels like it could jump out of her mouth. The noise from the street spikes when a bus rushes by, splashing more water up onto the sidewalk in her. She doesn't step back. She squeezes her eyes shut for a moment, breathes deeply, clutching the box with both hands as if begging for strength. Marcelo, inside, barely registers the world outside until there's a muffled clap of thunder, followed by laughter from a group of teenagers crossing the avenue. He thinks for a second about the meeting he's already late for, the kind nobody else can handle, and again checks the time, impatient. But something about that moment, that red light, when everything is suspended, gets under his skin like nothing else ever would. Outside, Clara bites her lip, her face full of drops mixing mud and tears. No one sees. She curls up a bit, bracing for the worst. But even without knowing why, she feels she has to try, that this car isn't just another one in the line. Maybe because it's stopped, maybe because so much has gone wrong in one day. Time between lights can seem endless when you're waiting for a miracle. And that's what she's waiting for, unable to explain it. Just standing there, shaking from cold and hunger inside and out. It's not just the hunger, not just the rain. It's that sense of being so close to something that, for the first time, might change everything. Marcelo crosses his legs, impatient, but suddenly notices a small shape outside his car. He narrows his eyes. All he sees is that little still silhouette. Another beggar, he thinks at first, but something inside doesn't fit. It's an odd discomfort, different from the automatic indifference he's felt 1,000 times before. Maybe it's the quiet out there. Maybe it's his own loneliness he works so hard to ignore. In the end, the whole world boils down to Clara and that black car on the corner. And, for now, that's it. An endless second, with two lives staring at each other, unaware everything is about to change. The rain had soaked through everything. Clara's old t-shirt clung cold and heavy to her skin, each drop making it weigh more. Her hair was dripping, strands glued to her cheeks and forehead, and even the wind felt like it was pushing her back each time she tried to move forward off the curb, standing there before that massive black car, looming in the middle of the intersection. Cars zipped past, horns blaring. Nobody saw, nobody cared about the skinny girl on the sidewalk. Only she understood what had to be done. She stood shivering for a moment. She wasn't even sure if it was the drizzle crawling down her back or the fear of approaching that car that seemed so out of reach, so clean, so shiny, a world people like her weren't allowed to get near. But she was too tired, too hungry, and the weight of that music box in her soaked hand felt like the last bit of hope she had left. The dark window reflected the street, and in it, Clara saw her own face. Dirty, streaked with mud, eyes huge and scared and rimmed red from rubbing away tears. The light was about to change again. Inside, the glow was soft, the warm comfort of another life. Nothing like lying on a wet cardboard mattress. Clara hugged the music box to her, held her breath, and closed the distance between the curb and the car. Her hand reached out first, shaky, until her fingers touched the cold window. The limousine almost felt alive, intimidating, powerful, as though she shouldn't even be allowed to touch it. Still, she knocked. Softly, like someone asking permission. A dull, muffled sound. The car. Nothing. No movement. No one inside seemed to notice. A man with an umbrella hurried behind her, splattering mud up her calves. A businessman glanced her way but walked faster, pretending Clara was just another obstacle on his path home. Clara glanced around, shame burning in her chest, but it was this or the cold, wet street again. She knocked again, a little harder this time, almost desperately hoping this car would be different, that someone would hear her. Inside, she saw a shadow stir. The man in the back seat turned a little, the glint of a gold watch. He seemed surprised or annoyed, she couldn't tell. His look froze Clara for a second, fear almost winning out over the last of her courage. He lifted his eyes from his phone, but stayed like that, like a person wondering if this is real or just another nuisance. The driver looked over, slowly. She caught just a glimpse, cold type, one who barely glances at life outside. The window didn't even tremble. No smile, no gesture. Clara's heart hammered loud, and for a second she wanted to run and hide her shame behind some pole, curl up and sleep until the cold left. But the music box was pressed in her hand, hurting almost. She knew she needed someone, just one chance, a word. So she knocked again, this time with anger, with real longing. This time it hurt her hand, hurt all the same as that deep need not to disappear for good, not to become just another forgotten child in a city when it rains. A horn blared behind, making everything jump. A few people in the other cars glanced her way, frowned, rolled their windows up fast when they saw the drenched girl. No one stopped, but Clara didn't look at any of them. She kept her eyes fixed on the man inside, hoping, by some miracle, he'd look back at her differently, not with disgust or fear, but as someone who really sees her. The window beside her didn't lower. The man in the back said something to the driver, who only frowned in the mirror and shook his head. For a moment, Clara knew she'd be ignored again, like so many times before. Out in the street, the cold seemed to seep deeper every time her hope shrank. The man's face grew more tense, but he didn't tell the driver to move. It was like a fight was going on inside his head. A brand new doubt she could see in how he clutched his phone, how his eyes stayed fixed on the mark her hand left clinging to the fogged glass. His watch glinted in the dark. His eyes, narrow and hard, searched for something without letting themselves soften, but Clara didn't drop her gaze. She stood there with everything she had: fear, hunger, the memory of her mom's face, and the faint shelter of that car. In the noise of traffic, she heard the silence inside the limo. Heavy silence, as though a minute could last a lifetime. She just stayed, trembling with hunger, hands aching with cold, eyes full of rain and hope, because she had nowhere left to turn. Time stopped. The wind hit harder. Her entire world shrank to that dark window, an impossible wall. The girl didn't let go of the music box. She didn't smile. She simply waited, hoping to hear anything from inside. The fear was huge, but her need was even greater. It was all she had. The limo's window makes that stubborn whine as it starts to lower, slowly, as if the car itself is reluctant. Just a crack. Clara feels cold wind slap her dirty face, water mixing with grime. Inside, it's dry warm. Outside, the street is nothing but mud, horns, the damp smell of asphalt and abandonment. Inside, nothing but silence and clean leather. Marcelo looks at her with a hard face. His expression barely moves. Only his eyes narrow, creasing the skin at the corners. "What do you want, girl?" His voice is flat, low, almost emotionless. He doesn't even take off his light-colored jacket, his tie perfectly knotted. It's as if even his neck can't leave its stiff place. Clara swallows. The sound of her empty stomach grumbling is louder than anything at that moment. But, embarrassed, she rubs her belly, trying to hide it. The tears come easy now, mixed with the rain outside. They start slow, but soon they're real, thick, running down her dirty chin. Her hand clutches the music box against her heart, so tightly her finger shakes, and her dirty nail nearly digs into her own skin. She bows her head for a moment, breathes in the metal scent of the box, and tries. "Mister, please." Her voice is shaky but clear. I just don't want to sleep on the street tonight. I'm so hungry. I can't even feel my hands. They're so cold. Any food, anything at all. Even just somewhere dry. I'll pay back everything, I promise. I won't stay long." A sob hiccups out. She brings her hand to her nose, wipes her face with her wrist, leaving a streak of pale mud on her cheek. Inside, Marcelo keeps his eyes fixed on her the way someone looks off into the distance. A wrinkle forms on his forehead, maybe irritation, maybe something else. Otherwise, he could be made of stone. But for one brief, almost invisible moment, he can't quite maintain so much disdain. He notices how Clara tries to hold on to her dignity, even as she begs. Everything about her speaks of abandonment, but she still tries. The silence on the avenue is heavy. Behind them, car horns, the sound of someone laughing loudly under a bar's awning, hurried footsteps. No one looks back. No one sees Clara. Only Marcelo. He's seen people like this before, digging through trash behind his building, begging for spare change outside fancy restaurants. He always looked away, walked on, picked up his pace. Deep down, he felt anger. Not toward them, but toward his own discomfort. That's what's running through his head now. Why did this girl have to come to me? Why here, why now? The driver pretends not to notice, hands steady on the wheel, eyes glued to the rearview mirror. He doesn't even dare breathe out loud. Clara summons courage from some broken place inside her. She clutches the little box to her chest, her mother's only keepsake. Then she looks through the window again, caught between fear and the scrap of hope she swears she still has. Sir, just for today? Please, just today. Her jacket hangs open, dripping, her thin arms shaking with cold and fear. The rain falls harder. A thin trickle runs from her hood, down inside her shirt. Clara doesn't know what to expect from this strange man, all polished on the outside and all stone on the inside. What she feels in that instant is more the urge to disappear than to stay, but something, maybe only desperation, keeps her rooted there. And she asks again, softly, more to herself than to him. Let me stay a little while. I don't want to be a bother. The car smells expensive, warm leather seats, men's cologne. Clara feels a burn of envy and longing so intense it hurts. She just wants to be invisible. She just wants to be heard. To feel a blanket, a piece of bread, a few hours of sleep without fearing someone will touch her in the night. Marcelo looks away for just a second, as if weighing whether losing time on this is worth it. But, again, he can't help it. The girl's eyes lock onto his, one huge, silent question. He bites his lip, fidgets with his cuff, adjusts his watch. Inside, something grinds, a memory, maybe, or just the anger of not being as indifferent as he wants. The stoplight changes 3 times. The windows fog from inside. The driver shifts his weight, impatient. Marcelo says nothing. He just looks, less and less sure what to do with his own discomfort. That girl, so small, so filthy, hair sticking to her forehead, on the other side of the window, seems to be pleading not just with him, but with the whole world all at once. And only he is there to listen. Clara trembles, and not only from cold. She's unsure if she'll finally get just a scrap of kindness. She hugs the worn little box to her chest, as though that battered thing could shield her from the world's worst. There's fear in her eyes, but also a resigned courage only abandoned children truly know. Please, sir. That phrase echoes inside Marcelo's head. For a split second his face softens, then hardens again. The only sound between them is rain drumming on the dear roof of the car, muffling Clara's hunger, her exhaustion, and the flicker of shame in Marcelo, one he'd never admit. Still, the window stays open a crack. It doesn't close. That's already something. To Clara, it's enough to promise herself not to give up. Not yet. Not while the window stays open. The rain keeps falling. Outside, the world spins. Red lights, dark alleys, people rushing by. But inside the limousine and just outside it, on that stretch of wet pavement, only 2 people exist for a moment, locked in a stare, a man who can't ignore as much as he wishes, and a girl who can't stop begging for the barest scrap of care. And for them, time stops beneath that storm. Clara stayed there, tiny on her side of the glass, mud-caked hands shaking as she slowly opened her fingers. She pulled the music box forward, not even able to lift her eyes fully because the rain ran down her hair, stuck to her lashes, soaked everything. Words failed her. Only the heavy tap of rain thrumming on the limousine window, mixed with a silence so fierce it made your chest hurt. Marcelo felt a pang in his gut he hadn't felt in years. He stared at the box without moving. It was old, the metal scarred, the corners dented. But right there on the lid you could read the engraving, even through rust and grime. For my daughter, with eternal love. The words he himself had ordered years before. It hit him like a punch. His face went instantly pale. You could see his jaw clench, and his hands gripped the leather seat like he was holding himself together, just barely. For a moment, no sound at all inside the car. The driver avoided the mirror. The two bodyguards in the back held their breath, just watching. And Clara, even soaked and shaking, raised the box as if offering up the last hope left in the world. The rain drummed louder. Fat drops nearly drowned the sound of traffic outside. A car honked down the street. People ran for shelter. But in there, even with the heater on, Marcelo felt a chill crawl up his spine, the kind that makes time freeze. He tried to breathe, to look again at the girl and at the gift that shouldn't be there. In his mind, that box couldn't exist anywhere but the past, much less in the dirty, lost, hungry hands of a child. Marcelo forced himself to meet her eyes, and what he saw made his heart race. There was a sorrow in them that even grown-ups rarely bear, mixed with the hope of someone who, even beaten down by life, still believes someone will help. Clara clung to the box like it was all she had in the world. Her tiny fingers, cracked and rough from life on the streets, held on with all their strength. And she shook, but not in fear of the man. It was cold, hunger, and the weariness of always having to beg. Her eyes just wanted an answer, a simple word. "Sir, please help me." But this time the plea slipped into silence. It was like the box spoke for her. Inside Marcelo's head, memories whirled. He saw his baby daughter's face, her birthday, the wrapped present, his wife's teary joy. He felt the ground vanish beneath his feet the day she disappeared, relived all the desperation. That box was the one thing he'd never found. And now, by miracle or some impossible twist, here it was in front of him. He tried to speak, but no sound came. His right hand reached toward the box but stopped, frozen before touching it. He was fighting everything he'd always believed, that nothing happens for a reason, that what's lost stays lost, that hope is for the weak. For the first time in years, Marcelo felt his knees go weak. He forced himself back against the seat, one hand covering his mouth, the look of a man holding in his whole world so it doesn't collapse. No one said anything. The silence grew heavier, packed with questions no one dared ask. Even the driver sneaked a look, wide-eyed, startled to see his boss like that. The rain outside seemed to intensify, as if to give the moment more drama, pounding so hard you wanted to disappear into the car and never come out. Clara looked at the box, then at him, then at the floor. She didn't really grasp what was happening, but her expression changed just a bit, suddenly dizzy with hope. A glow in her eyes only those ignored all day can really know. She saw something in Marcelo's face, not sure if it was fear or pain, but in that instant, the distance between them shrank. Marcelo closed his eyes for a second. You could see his chest rising and falling fast. He rested his head on the seat back, overwhelmed. This businessman who never bowed to anything seeming bowed by the weight. Then, slowly, without a word, he looked at the girl again. This time not as just another beggar on the street, but as if he saw a ghost from his own past, a chance he never imagined he'd get again. Time seemed to stop. Only their eyes spoke. And the box, dirty and old, now swaying gently in Clara's small hand, making each second heavier. It felt like everything that had happened in Marcelo's life, the losses, the pride, the fear, was rushing up, hurting more than he'd ever admit. Right there, in that expensive limousine with its luxury scent and cushioned rain-muffled air, Marcelo thought he might faint. His heart raced, his hands shook, his thoughts a jumble. And for the first time in ages, he realized life could change in a breath, a detail, even in the shape of a rusted box in the hands of a filthy child crying for help. Marcelo just stood there, and the girl, still waiting for a response, gripped the box tighter, as if guarding her story and everything she'd lost. The silence dragged on, rain pounding, and a strange feeling was born between them, something like fear, doubt, and a painful hope no one could put into words. All you could feel was that, from that second on, nothing would ever be the same. The silence inside the limousine grows heavier. Marcelo's still there, eyes locked on the box in the girl's hand. You can see sweat on his brow, even in the cold. The air feels trapped, and for a moment he forgets to breathe properly. Outside, the rain drums down, runs across the window, makes everything blurred, just like his head now. Clara hugs the box to her chest, trying to hide it with her small hands, all caked with mud and chewed nails. Her hair sticks to her forehead, locks drip from under her torn hood. She watches the man's face, searching for any sign of acceptance or willingness to help. But Marcelo says nothing, doesn't move a muscle. His expression is a mixture of fear, discomfort, and some old pain, like someone who's just opened a wound he hardly knew was still there. The car radio hums quietly in the background. There's a strange smell of wet leather mixed with Marcelo's expensive cologne and now Clara's strong street mud scent. The driver doesn't turn, pretends not to hear anything going on in the back. After a few seconds, Marcelo finally moves. He just shakes his head, mouth tight, the lines on his forehead deepening. He speaks softly, as if not wanting to say the words. That's not possible. There are plenty of boxes like that. Must be just a coincidence. Clara's eyes go wide. She clutches the music box tighter, fights the urge to cry, but holds on. Her voice trembles, barely a whisper. I found it with my mom. She said it was important, that it was just for me. She stares down at her own feet, takes some time to gather courage. Her stomach growls loudly, and she looks up again, searching his face for some trace of compassion. When my mother got sick, we traded everything for food. Except this box. She said I should keep it until I found the right person. Marcelo looks away, stares at the rainy glass, and inside it's a hurricane. He starts to wonder, is this some scam? That old engraving, can you fake it? But it was exactly like the one he'd ordered all those years ago. For my daughter, with eternal love. Only he and his wife had known about the gift. He feels a flash of anger. Someone playing with the most painful memory of his life just to squeeze money. Then again, there are her eyes, so deep, so honest. The way those little hands both hide and show the only treasure she's had her whole life. The way she speaks of her mother, remembering every detail, every desperate trade, every sacrifice just to keep that box near. It stirs things inside him he never wanted to face again. Marcelo takes a long, shaky breath. His hand trembles when he reaches out for the box, but he can't go through with it. He pulls back, elbows on knees, face hidden in his hands for a moment. From the back seat, you can hear Clara releasing her breath slowly, hugging the little object, rocking it gently, as though its silent song might keep her safe. He thinks, maybe she's just a lost kid, maybe it's a trick. If it is, I can't give in. But if it's not, and that, if it's not, lies heavy on his heart, almost painful. He wants to scream, tell the girl to leave, end it before it hurts more. But for some reason, nothing comes out. Outside, horns blare, people curse the jam and the rain. But inside the limousine, time has stopped. Marcelo glimpses the girl's face, so dirty, so tired, so familiar. No, he tells himself, it must be coincidence. Or I'm so desperate I want to see my daughter and every child on the street. Clara senses his doubt, even if she doesn't understand it. She leans her forehead on the window, watches the water streak. She speaks quietly, almost to herself. I never knew who my father was, but I always thought he'd recognize me one day. The words cut through Marcelo like a blade. His chest tightens again, memories flooding in. The last time he went to the police to beg for news of his daughter, sleepless nights listening to the music box play, the guilt of never finding her. Now this girl, with the same box, the same words he'd engraved with his own hands. Deep down, he wants to believe, but he's afraid. Afraid of opening the door to hope and being lied to once more. Angry that someone might be using his worst memories to break him again. But there's also something flickering inside, something he thought he'd killed off forever, the urge to care. The engine's rumble shatters the silence. Marcelo realizes he's taking too long to react, that people are watching from the street, the downpour making everything seem more urgent. He breathes deeply, meets Clara's gaze again, sees the fear and the bravery knotted together. The doubt is still roaring in his chest, but he can't walk away. He's stuck in this moment, not knowing which way to run. Clara, shivering, even tries to smile, but it's just a scared sort of smile, the way kids pretend to be brave. Her belly growls again, but she doesn't ask for anything, only tightens her grip on the box, unwilling to let go. Marcelo's denial lingers in the car, but deep down he knows. He can't pretend nothing's happened, that this girl hasn't shaken everything he tried to bury. But admitting that still feels impossible. Marcelo stays still for a few seconds, Limo engine purring, the wipers crossing the windshield in an almost maddening rhythm, and Clara outside, those big, wide, mud-smeared, panic-filled eyes fixed on him. The rain falls, not the furious, storm kind, but the cold, dirty kind that makes everything feel grayer. The window still holds the imprint of her hand, and for Marcelo, that image sticks in his mind. The driver checks the mirror, unsure what to do, but says nothing, probably just chalking it up as another of those bizarre incidents that sometimes cross a rich man's path. Marcelo takes a deep, almost irritated breath. Too much coincidence. Can't be real, he thinks, but his chest aches in a way he hasn't felt in years. Then, on a strange impulse, he tells the driver to pull out of the traffic and park on a quieter side street, somewhere with fewer lights. Open the door. Quick, before anyone sees, he says, his voice coming out harsh, louder than he meant. Clara slips in, shuffling her feet, gathering all the courage she has. Her dress, once white, weighs heavy with the mud and rain of the street. Her messy hair sticks to her head. She presses the box to her chest, like a shield. She perches on the very edge of the leather seat, barely making contact, just absorbing everything around her, shrinking back, terrified she'll make a mess or get scolded. She looks down, fiddles with her fingers, can't stop trembling. The seconds stretch tight in Marcelo's throat. He grabs his phone, dials someone, paler than usual. The silence as he waits for the answer weighs down the car, broken only by the distant city sounds, far-off horns, an engine racing, rain streaking the window. I need you to look something up for me. Now. It's urgent, he says, making no attempt to hide the stress, eyes never straying far from the girl's dirty face, the battered box. Muted voices on the other end. He hangs up, tosses his phone on the seat, runs a hand through his hair, nervous, not knowing what to do with his hands. He stares at Clara, then looks away, out at the wet streets. Silence drags on until it hurts. Clara hardly dares breathe, trying not to make a sound. Every so often, she glances quickly at the man who changed everything in her life in just one afternoon. Her stomach grumbles, but she won't dream of asking for food, just sits there, hugging the box, staring at her own filthy nails, waiting for this to turn into a nightmare at any moment. Marcelo notices her thin legs, the scraped knee, the way she bites her lip, thinking no one will see. He's gotten used to not feeling. It's always been easier to shut down, to be cold, to lock his heart up after what happened to his family. But now it's different. There's a knot of sorrow and doubt in his throat that just won't go away. He wants to drive away, vanish, put all this pain far behind. But deep down, he has to know. He needs to know. After a while, he leans forward, impatient, but trying to soften his tone. You're coming home with me tonight. You're not sleeping out on the street again. It doesn't sound comforting. It's more like a command. Clara just nods, small, as if she doesn't dare question anything. She hides the plastic spoon she used for scavenging, ashamed, waiting to be chastised. But Marcelo says nothing more. He just stares straight ahead, serious and tense, afraid any word could ruin everything. The limousine starts up again, gliding through wet streets. Inside, the expensive leather smell mixes with damp clothes, rain, the scent of a childhood cut short. The radio display shows a song title, but no one notices. The driver adjusts the mirror, shoots a quick glance at the girl, eyes widening at the state of her, but doesn't say a word. In the back, Marcelo clenches his hands so tightly his fingers ache. He thinks of his missing daughter, the forgotten toy years ago, the hollow space inside himself that never filled. He remembers the false alarms, the people who only wanted money or attention. He recalls all those sleepless nights, birthdays spent looking at an empty chair. That child sitting there, all mud and fear, ignites something old in him. A question impossible to ignore. What if it's true? Clara, sure it'll all end with a shout or her being sent back out, looks out the window. She sees the city lights, droplets sliding on the glass, people huddling under awnings. For a second, she imagines what it's like to have a real roof again. She dreams of the smell of hot food, a soft bed, someone saying, "It's okay, it's over." But she quickly corrects herself. She doesn't want to hope. She learned early that hope hurts worse than cold. Marcelo knows he can't turn away now, not tonight. He's going to see this through, even if it costs him, even if he wants to run. When they pull up to the gates at home, Clara's eyes go wide at the mansion looming ahead, gleaming in the rainy dark. He says nothing, just gets out and waits for her, not offering a hand. They both hurry along the stone path, avoiding each other's gaze. Marcelo pretends it's routine, but his heart beats fast and jagged. Clara tries not to feel invisible, tries to keep up, but still senses that one misstep would cost her everything again. A completely new world. All because of a filthy music box in the lap of a child desperate to hear someone call her daughter again. Marcelo's house was bigger than Clara had ever dreamed such places could be. When she stepped out of the rain, clothes cold and clinging to her skin, she stopped in the center of an enormous hall, staring up at a ceiling so high it nearly touched the clouds. She felt smaller than ever. The walls were lined with huge portraits, filled with important people, stern faces, strange clothes. Right at the entrance, a rug so soft she was afraid to soil it, after tracking in all that mud. Clara curled her toes, trying to walk on tiptoe, not making a sound. The smell was something else, clean, sweet, strong, nothing like the street. She breathed it in slowly, trying to make sense of it. Lavender, maybe, or expensive flowers. The scent seemed to look at her too, reminding her she didn't belong there. A woman appeared out of nowhere, dressed in a light uniform, her expression hard. She looked Clara up and down, lips tight, pinning her with a glare. She whispered something to another maid, who shot her a look before turning away quickly. The hush of whispers spread through the hall like the scent. No one wanted Clara there. She heard hurried footsteps, low voices. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Marcelo stood near the stairs, face more shut down than ever. He didn't really meet the girl's eyes, but he kept watch. He looked so tired, so lost, holding his own arm as if at a loss, twisting his fingers slowly. Sometimes he glanced at Clara, then quickly at the floor, fiddling with his watch. He wasn't the confident man from TV. He was just a man, afraid of something he couldn't name. No words came easy. Clara tightened her grip on the music box, squeezing until her knuckles turned white. She wouldn't set it down, wouldn't put it on any table. It was the only thing that was hers. If she let it go for even a second, it might vanish again. A servant passed by, carrying a covered silver tray, glancing at her with barely veiled disdain, almost bumping into her. Clara tried to apologize with her eyes, but he moved on. Another worker mopped the floors, sweeping carefully, dusting only the path she had taken. Clara felt an aching, deep hunger. Her stomach rumbled, but she didn't ask for food. Her fear was bigger. She sat on the far edge of a gilded chair, staring at the tips of her dirty sneakers, frayed laces about to fall apart. She thought of her mother, the sweet smell of her embrace. She thought of how many days had passed since anyone hugged her or said her name gently. There was a hollow ache in her chest. The sounds inside this house were strange. Dishes clinking, voices from upstairs, a grandfather clock ticking its own slow time. So different from the noise of the street, from the cars, the rain beating on metal roofs. Here, there was too much silence, as if no one wanted to talk, as if she was the only thing out of place. Through the glass doors, Clara saw the garden, huge, filled with things that might as well have come from another world. Giant roses, hedges shaped like animals, fountains of crystal-clear water. She didn't even consider stepping out there. It seemed forbidden. The wild flowers she sometimes sniffed in the street to trick her hunger had never shown like that. She stood slowly, dragging the chair just a little. She didn't want to draw attention. She ran her fingers through her hair, trying to comb out the mud, but only made it worse. She thought of asking where she might clean up, but couldn't bring herself to speak. The words stuck in her throat. Fear, just like when it rained and cars sped by, splattering her with muddy water without so much as a glance. Marcelo, still near the stairs, watched everything the way someone does when they want to approach, but don't know how. He took deep breaths, adjusted his tie even though no one was around, clearly unsettled. At one point, he thought about saying something. He even opened his mouth. But then he closed it again. It looked like he was searching the air for a sentence that never came. Clara just wanted a hug. She just wanted someone to tell her everything would be okay, that she could trust, that someone actually saw her there. Not just the dirty little girl, but someone with a name, a story, a fear. But the room was full of expensive furniture and empty of warmth. She curled up a little deeper in the armchair. Her eyes stung, almost wet, but she didn't want to cry in front of the others. Didn't want to give them one more reason to look at her strangely. She stared out the window, trying to escape in her mind, imagining her mother's hand pulling her to some warm corner, with soup on the table and a blanket that smelled like cheap soap. Marcelo stayed standing for a while longer. Then he slowly climbed the stairs, without looking back, like someone carrying a weight they're afraid to let go of. Clara felt that, no matter how rich he was almost as lost as she was. The house had so much space. But, really, there wasn't a place for her there. The rain wouldn't let up outside. Drops beat steadily against the mansion's tall windows, making that repetitive sound that sometimes reminded her of footsteps running on the floor. Clara stood in the hallway by the wide staircase, her small hands tucked into the pockets of the old sweatshirt she'd managed to save when she got there. She didn't want to make noise. She just wanted to listen. On the other side of the door, the voices would rise and fall, sometimes so cold they hurt her ears. It wasn't shouting. It was that frosty tone of conversation, the kind that never lets anyone feel comfortable. Marcelo's lawyer spoke slowly, almost whispering, but every word hit the girl like a hammer to the chest. Marcelo, you need to think. This isn't how you handle a situation like this. The press already knows. This is going to turn into a scandal, for sure. For a second, Clara thought about going back to the street. She closed her eyes, breathed in the smell from the hall. Clean, expensive, nothing like anything in her life. But none of that brought peace. Her chest tightened, the way it does when you're hungry. But this time it wasn't stomach hunger. It was the hunger to stay, to be accepted, not to be kicked out one more time. She heard another voice, much higher, probably a young woman's. Uncle, can't you see? This is a scam. Somebody's trying to trick you. This girl showed up out of nowhere, filthy. Please, don't drag our family into this kind of thing. The silence hurt most of all. She'd never known a sadness that deep. She almost laughed to herself. On the street, people always talked about her and kids like her that way, but at least nobody pretended to care before they said no. She crept closer to the door, holding back tears. The floor was icy, but she barely noticed. All she wanted was to hear Marcelo's answer. She's not just another one of those kids. You need to understand, she showed up with that little box. No one else knew about that. And even if she's not my daughter, I can't just pretend she doesn't exist. The voices rose again. Someone took a deep breath and started listing risks. Aren't you thinking of yourself, Marcelo? What if it's a circus? What if you become a laughingstock? It's already online. The gossip sites. Millionaire rescues mystery girl from the streets. See? There's a picture of the limousine, and of her too. She bit her lip, only realizing when it started to hurt. The word circus echoed inside her skull. To be called a circus, a scam, anything but who she was, just a cold little girl, trying not to lose herself. Elsewhere in the house, the cook and the doorman whispered, but she could make out enough. This can only end badly. Poor man, he must have lost his mind. Clara lowered her head. She pressed her hand deeper into the pocket of her sweatshirt, hoping maybe she could disappear. In the living room, the lawyer pushed on. It's my duty to recommend this. Don't bring a stranger into your house. And I'm not just thinking of your reputation, but your safety. If this goes wrong, you'll regret it the rest of your life. Someone slammed a hand on the table. The sharp sound pierced the door. Marcelo went quiet a long while. No one dared speak. Just the rhythm of his pen tapping on the glass. Through the crack, the girl saw that serious profile, Marcelo's eyes full of things kept hidden, but this time with a new kind of shame. Not shame of her, but shame because of the others, his own family, the way they treated someone just for being dirty, just for being from the street. Clara pressed her forehead to the cold wood of the door, hardly breathing. She thought of her mother, of the box's tinkling tune, of the words engraved inside. She wanted to ask, why is the whole world against me? Why is it impossible to be someone important's child? Just because I don't look like anyone's child. Suddenly, from the other side, the sound of a vibrating phone. When someone answered, the voice was harsh, impatient. Marcelo, are you blind? This story's traveled all over the country. There are journalists at your door. Tell me you didn't let that girl stay the night. Marcelo answered softly, but with conviction. She stayed. Tonight she stays. Silence. Clara's heart pounded so hard it hurt. She closed her eyes to memorize that moment, to hold on to it, in case someone threw her out later. But outside, The storm only seemed to get worse. Later, Marcelo passed through the hall. His face looked steady, but exhausted. Red eyes, slumped shoulders, patchy beard like he hadn't slept at all. He paused near the girl, almost holding his breath. He wanted to speak, but couldn't. He just held out his hand, like he meant to touch her, but it stopped halfway. She looked up, waiting for a gentle word, a "don't worry," but all she got was silence. You could tell he was more sad than angry, more lost than commanding. In that massive mansion, it was as if the two of them were alone in the world, and the world wanted to remind them, every second, that it didn't want them together. Clara felt a mix of hope and fear at the same time. She wanted to run, to shout, to plead. "See me. Please, hold on to me." But she stayed perfectly still, a small shadow waiting, just once in her life, for someone to say she was real, that she had the right to exist in that place. The night was long, full of wind and thunder. And while everyone else seemed anxious to separate Clara from Marcelo, no one noticed what really hurt. The fear of being loved, and, even worse, the fear of never being loved again. The laboratory building was so bright inside it hurt her eyes. The floor gleamed, and when Clara entered hand in hand with Marcelo, she felt embarrassed by her patched sneakers and knees still stained with old mud, even after so many showers. He walked seriously, gripping her hand almost too tight, as if needing to prove to himself he had the courage to go through with this. The place reeked of alcohol and silence. Marcelo said barely 2 words the whole way from the house. He fiddled with his phone, scrolling through maps, news, anything to avoid looking at Clara. But she felt his gaze now and then, watching her from the side, searching her face as if he wanted to see for certain if she was really who she claimed to be. Sometimes his eyes would fix on her tangled hair, sometimes dwell on her small face, as if looking for some remembered trace, something long lost. The security guard at the lab asked for documents. Marcelo fumbled through his folder with trembling hands. No one said anything kind. No one looked Clara in the eye. The silence pressed down, thick as heavy rain on a roof. A woman in a lab coat explained the test, speaking slowly, but to Clara it all sounded like words underwater. She only understood needle, blood, that she'd have to sit in a high, cold, spinning chair. When she sat, her feet didn't reach the floor. She glanced around, searching for a familiar face, but there was no one. No mother, no friend, no one from her old life. She saw the needle. Her eyes filled with tears. She wiggled her legs but stayed quiet because, for as long as she'd known, kids who complain get hit or sent away. She clenched her fingers so tightly in her sweatshirt pocket that her nails left marks. The woman in the lab coat tried to smile, but her eyes were heavy with fatigue. Marcelo leaned against the counter. He stood there, staring at his palm and out the window into the darkness. He breathed deeply. His face was stiff, like a statue in a fire. His lips pressed tight, sweaty, but his eyes, if anyone had looked, were red and shining, as if he was somewhere else, reliving everything he'd lost. No one noticed, but he trembled faintly. Fear, anger, even shame for being afraid, all tangled up in a man who'd faced judges, shareholders, journalists, but now was brought low by a 7-year-old girl. When the woman stuck Clara's arm, she swallowed her sob. It hurt, of course it did, but she just gripped her pocket harder and bit her tongue to keep from whimpering. She didn't want him to see her weak. Her red blood stained the cotton. The woman wrapped up her arm, half-smiled, called Marcelo to the next room. He took Clara's hand again, but this time gentler, almost as if he was scared of hurting her. They signed papers. The clock ticked loud. Each second boomed like thunder. Outside in the waiting room, the rain began to beat hard against the glass. It was a gray afternoon, the kind where wind whistles through every crack and everything turns into waiting. Clara sat in a chair much too big for her. The white lights made everything colder. The world seemed far away now. People rushed down the hall. Some glanced at her, but no one stopped. She sat there, watching the rain, trying to figure out what would become of her life. Her stomach rumbled quietly, but she didn't care. What she wanted was to know who she really was. Would they throw her out again? Would he disappear forever? Marcelo paced back and forth. His phone rang nonstop, but he ignored it. Now and then he'd look at Clara. He couldn't tell if he felt anger at himself, hope, or just plain panic. His face was paler than ever. Sweat ran down his temples, even with the blasting air conditioner. He'd always played the part of the confident, decisive man. But right now, he was just a father afraid of losing a daughter for the second time. In Clara's mind, 1,000 scenes flashed. The smell of her mother's hair, the sound of the music from the little box, the face of a brother she barely remembered. She wished, really softly, almost in a secret, that someone would look at her and say, "Daughter, you can stay. Nobody will send you away." But no one said a word. The clock kept ticking. The rain grew heavier. The secretary said the results would take a while. Days, long days. Marcelo sighed heavily. He stared at his hand, fiddled with the old ring on his finger, lost in thought. He didn't know whether to hope for a miracle or a lie, because if it was true, he'd have to look back, to face everything he hadn't done, everything he'd ignored. The fear of loving too much and losing it all over again. On the way out, Clara tried to ask where they'd sleep, if there'd be a place for her. But she bit her lip, kept quiet. Marcelo saw the question in her eyes, but just shook his head and squeezed her hand. Silence filled the car on the ride home. Only the sound of the pouring rain, the steamed-up window, two worlds trapped inside. An adult drowning in the terror of loss and a child clinging to a thin thread of hope with all the strength she had. On the way back, tears rolled down Clara's face, but Marcelo pretended to watch the traffic. Maybe because if he faced her, the whole world might fall apart. The house was larger than anything Clara had ever seen. Cold on the outside, full of silence within. The walls seemed to hold on to an air of waiting, of something that never ends. The ceiling was so high her voice echoed when she spoke in the hall. Outside, rain beat heavily on the window, thick, heavy drops making a soothing noise, almost like shelter. Those drops reminded her of the nights she slept huddled under a storefront awning, wishing her mother would come back just one more night. Now, lying in a huge bedroom still scented with strangers, Clara couldn't fall asleep. She ran her fingers slowly along the clean sheet, trying to memorize the flowered pattern. Everything in that bed was soft, different from the cardboard that sometimes served as a mattress on the street. But it was as if the pillow didn't know her name. It wasn't hers. She tossed and turned, clutching the music box to her chest. It was the only thing that made sense. The inscription was faded from so much handling. The finish scratched, but its weight was family, was promise. While she tried to push back the fear, Clara closed her eyes and pulled her mother's face from memory, as if sketching her in the dark. In her dream, her mother's hand stroked her hair, the way she did when Clara had a fever or when hunger hurt. "Don't leave me here, Mama. Take me with you, please," she whispered, so softly only the pillow might hear. There, in that dream state where longing and memory blend, Clara clung to her mother's dress hem. A simple dress, stained with flour, but the only safe place in the world. But the dream shifted suddenly. Her mother's face grew distant, and everything went gray. Strange voices, eyes shining from endless passing cars. Clara felt small again, suffocated by the indifference of people who never looked at her. She woke with a start, short of breath, her heart pounding like those dogs she'd seen running from the guards at night. It took her a while to realize where she was. The lamp was on, bathing everything in gold. The door was ajar. Behind it, Clara heard footsteps. Slow ones, different from the sharp steps of the house's women or the hard shoes of the staff. These were the steps of someone unsure if they even wanted to be seen. In the hallway, Marcelo watched in silence. The soft light touched part of his face. He had deep circles under his eyes, deeper than from endless meetings. He gripped the doorframe so hard his knuckles turned white. He seemed unable to enter or leave, just linger there, watching. His elegant suit was already rumpled, as if he'd forgotten his own importance. He wasn't even sure why he was there. He'd never been one to pray, didn't make a habit of it. But that night was different. He felt something twisting in his gut, like someone had flipped everything inside out. He saw Clara hugging her music box, her eyes wet, her brow furrowed as if she was holding in the sadness so no one would notice. He caught himself remembering how many times he'd walked past children on the street, always so sure it wasn't his problem. But now, seeing that little girl battling her own monsters in the dark, Marcelo felt truly guilty for the first time. The kind of guilt that makes you want to apologize to the very walls of the house. From across the room, he heard Clara murmur, "Mama, stay with me. Please." That plea cut straight through him. He had to lean harder on the door not to fall apart. He closed his eyes, lowered his head. Quietly, almost whispering so no one would hear, he said the only words that came. God, help me. Just this once. Show me what to do. He didn't know if it worked, if anyone was listening, but it was all he had to give. Inside, Clara dried her eyes on the sheet. Her tiny, bony hand squeezed the music box and turned the crank a little. The melody rang out weakly, off-key from overuse, but it was still a kind of embrace. She closed her eyes again, clinging to the tune to keep from falling into the hole fear opened in the night. Marcelo stood frozen, watching her chest rise and fall, the way she tucked her knees in as if trying to protect everything she had left. It was impossible not to feel it. Every time she held her breath, every sigh, felt like another stone on his back. He almost left, took a step back, but his hand stayed on the wood. He wanted to go in, to sit on the edge of her bed, a kind word, any word. But pride and fear kept him rooted. What if it all goes wrong, he wondered. What if she isn't really her? He just waited, hoping for some sign. Outside, the rain slowed, just an occasional drop. The house stayed quiet, just the sound of music and Clara's breathing. Marcelo finally turned away, walking the hall as if carrying a tremendous weight. But for the first time in many years, he carried hope alongside the fear. In the darkness of her room, Clara almost asleep, she tightened her grip on the hope for a miracle. Because, even if she didn't understand, it felt like that night was full of invisible angels, holding her hand. It was early, but no one had slept. The big, golden wall clock seemed to make fun of them with its relentless tick-tock, tick-tock. In the corner of the living room, Clara sat in a huge armchair, legs dangling, scanning the room with a tense face. She tried to be brave, but was scared. Her hands trembled, though only someone paying close attention would notice. Her hair was still a bit tangled, as if she'd never quite gotten used to sleeping on clean sheets or to hot showers every day. She squeezed her little finger tightly, absent-mindedly, like an old trick for gathering courage. Marcelo, facing the massive window, his back to everyone, looked like a man ringed by ghosts. Shoulders hunched, eyes distant. His reflection in the glass showed a face paler than ever. He sighed softly, trying to stay firm, but inside everything was churning. His chest burned. He wasn't wearing his immaculate tie today, or even his usual suit. He looked smaller in that old, dark sweater, as if he didn't want to look like a millionaire at that moment. The family lawyer sat by the door, far off, impatiently tapping his foot to the rhythm of the clock. Two maids near him whispered to each other. One, the cook, wanted to smile at Clara, but nerves made every gesture awkward, clumsy. Then, footsteps. The doctor appeared in the hallway, holding a thick, sealed envelope so wide it almost glowed. He was a serious man, but today he seemed gentler, as if he understood the weight of what he was carrying. The silence grew heavier. Marcelo turned to face him. Nobody moved. The doctor looked at Clara before Marcelo, almost as if asking permission. Even the furniture felt like it was holding its breath. Marcelo walked toward him, hand out but shaking. The envelope nearly slipped from his fingers. He licked his lips, tried to speak, but no sound came. The doctor just gave a short nod. It was time. Marcelo stared at the document like a man confronting a door that had been locked for years whose key he just found. His fingers broke the seal, accidentally tearing the edge. His hands, big, strong, shook the thin paper between them. He sat at the edge of the sofa. Instinctively, everyone drifted closer, drawn like magnets. Meanwhile, Clara watched only Marcelo, chin lifted, not blinking. She'd learned long ago not to expect anything good, but now, in this moment, her eyes sparked with something like hope and fear all at once. The silence was so thick, you could hear the rain pattering softly on the glass, a car horn far in the street, as though life continued out there while inside, time had stopped. Marcelo inhaled sharply, scanned the paper quickly, then again, slower, almost in disbelief. His hand went to his mouth. The doctor stepped closer and, with that low, professional voice, finally spoke the words nobody dared whisper, the results. They confirm. Clara is, indeed, your biological daughter, Mr. Bastos. The words hung in the air, as if they needed time to come down and become true. There wasn't a celebration, no shouts, no jumping for joy. First came silence. Marcelo blinked hard, raised his eyes to Clara, and in that moment his face broke down. The coldness that had made him feared in business seemed to melt off his chin, out his eyes, which quickly grew red. He covered his face with both hands and bent his head. The crying came hard, ugly, loud, without dignity, like a child who's held back for too long, refusing to beg for love. He dropped to his knees on the carpet, forgetting about his age, his status. His whole body shook. He called the girl's name with a cracked voice, as though he'd spent years swallowing his own hurt. Clara was frozen at first. Maybe from fear, maybe from so long without anyone's embrace. But when she saw Marcelo like that, she slipped off the sofa, knees unsteady, and placed her small hand on his shoulder. She got close, gently tugged him by his sweater, like waking someone from a nightmare. She whispered so softly only he could hear, I knew it. Mama never lied to me. She'd say, you have an angel, Clara. He'll find you when you need him most. Marcelo didn't answer, just hugged her tight, as if trying to shield her from the whole world. His tears soaked her shirt, but Clara didn't move, just closed her eyes and breathed deep, like someone finally able to rest. In the corner, the cook sobbed in secret. The maid who always grumbled also put her hand to her chest, eyes wide with wonder, never imagining that man could look like this. The lawyer stood, dumbfounded, unsure what to do with this scene. He fought it, but turned away to hide his tears, pretending to shuffle through his files. The doctor stepped aside, quickly dabbing away a tear, because he knew what it was to lose something forever, and understood the miracle of seeing a pain that big, if not end, at least pause. Marcelo kept repeating, trembling, voice choked, forgive me, my daughter, forgive me, and each time, hugged the girl tighter, as if he could make up for the years, the cold, the hunger, the loneliness. In the middle of that embrace, Clara finally smiled, her cheeks streaked with tears. The world outside kept raining, horns honking, but in that moment, for the first time, she felt no fear at all. There was only love, like a warm blanket after a night too long to bear. And on that carpet, on his knees, Marcelo was no longer just a millionaire. He was, once more, just a father. In the bright stillness of that room, Marcelo signs his name with a steady signature, though his fingers tremble slightly. Outside, the sky stays gray, cold, the distant sound of rain tapping at the window matching everything that still pulses in his chest. It's not just about forms and signatures now. It feels like everything there, even time itself, has stopped to watch Clara. She sits to the right of the desk, clutching her music box to her chest, lightly fidgeting her fingers the way she did when she waited for someone to notice her. The camera flashes start popping before Marcelo even finishes writing his last name. The press, eyes wide, hungry for any headline they can get. But his face isn't the same one from business magazines. There's an old sorrow there, a kind of shame, and also the strength of someone who's chosen not to live the old way anymore. He glances at Clara, eyes wet, fearful, but also hopeful. Maybe that's why he lifts the microphone, his hands moving slowly, as if asking permission not to ruin the moment. His voice starts out soft. Marcelo breathes deep, as if pulling the weight of the world into himself, then lets it out. I want to apologize. Not just to my daughter, but to all the Claras in this world, because I spent years pretending I didn't see. I lost time, I lost life, I lost my own heart, while people like her suffered outside my closed windows. You can hear people swallowing hard in the back. The lawyer wipes his eyes, disguising it as scratching his nose. A few reporters put down their cameras for a second, sheepish, as if Marcelo's words had stirred something old inside them too. Clara's eyes are already sparkling by this point. She doesn't understand every complicated word, but she feels it. The way she looks at Marcelo now isn't fear, nor just gratitude. It's as if she's watching a father being born right there, in front of everyone. Her small hand reaches for his on the table, her finger tracing the gold ring, a shy, simple gesture, but so deep that the whole room notices. Marcelo gently squeezes her hand, as if to say, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Someone from the council begins a formal speech, saying this is history, that a family has become a family again. But Marcelo barely hears any of it. All that matters is Clara, is the scent of rain drifting in through the window, her quiet breathing so close by. Deep inside, he thinks of every face he's ignored on the street. Every time he sped up his car for fear of dirtying the carpet. Every night he slept without wondering whether someone was hungry or alone. And suddenly, the shame turns into resolve. Not to clean up his own guilt, but because now there's someone real looking back at him, someone who needed help and was finally seen. The reporters start asking questions. What will he do next? What has changed? Marcelo takes a deep breath, this time with a new strength. I won't pretend not to see anymore. I'll use every chance I get to make sure no more children go through what my daughter went through. She doesn't just inherit my name, she's my hope. And everything I have now will be used to change lives. This time, the silence is enormous on this side. Only the clicks of cameras, a few people sniffling, Clara resting her head lightly on his arm and closing her eyes for a moment, as if a piece of peace had settled into her for good. There was a moment almost no one noticed. Marcelo knelt down right there by her chair, something grown-ups almost never do for children. He hugged Clara tightly, whispered, his voice choked, "I'm sorry, my child. I looked for you, but it took me too long to really see." It wasn't a grand apology, not some soap opera speech. It was just a man, broken and rebuilt from the inside out, accepting the truth of who he had become. Someone better. The crowd began to clap. It wasn't celebration, it was respect, maybe even relief. Some seemed to think of their own children, others looked at Clara as if to say, it could have been any kid out there. And finally, that much-awaited photo, Marcelo holding his daughter's hand, tears streaming down but with an honest smile, the kind you hardly ever see on the faces of the wealthy. Clara left the room with a light step, almost running, already clinging to Marcelo's arm. At the door, she turned her head just to check if he was really following her, like a child still doubting a miracle. Marcelo saw, smiled, stooped down to pick her up in his arms. Outside, the rain had thinned, but the air still carried those scents of wet earth, of beginnings. And even as his suit got soaked, Marcelo didn't put Clara down. Not for a second. He looked up at the sky, felt the cold water on his forehead, and thought, between a sad shiver and a new smile, that maybe this was the only day in his life when walking out into the rain didn't mean loneliness, but a new start. Clara, pressed close to his chest, listened to his heart thundering, heard the whole world telling her, in perfect silence, that this was her place. And now, no one, never again, would take that from her. Marcelo never liked the spotlight. But that morning, with sunlight creeping timidly through the clouds, he was standing there in front of dozens of microphones and cameras, his arm around Clara's shoulders. The way he looked at her was nothing like what the news used to show. There was tension, of course. Marcelo never knew how to handle emotion in public, but there was also a pride so huge it nearly burst from his chest. Clara clung tightly to his arm, still afraid that everything might vanish at any moment, but now there was a new light in her eyes. Hope. She wore a simple but clean little dress, her hair in a lopsided ponytail she'd tried to do herself. Her smile was shy, but every time she looked up at Marcelo it grew a little more, as if she was trying to believe that this new life was real. The mansion, once so silent, just the hurried footsteps of staff and endless meetings, was utterly changed. Children ran across the gardens, Clara pulling two boys by one hand and a younger girl by the other. Their laughter was loud, light, nothing like the wary giggles of those first weeks. Marcelo watched from the window, overcome. Sometimes he closed his eyes just to listen, not thinking about work or money. Just himself, his daughter, and that improbable sound inside those walls. In the parlor, there were fresh flowers Clara had picked herself. A small table brimming with colored paper, glue, blunt scissors. And in the center, the music box, the one that changed everything, now polished, with a photo of mother and daughter beside it. Clara showed the picture to the other children, told them a little, but her eyes always shimmered when she spoke of my mom, who still looks after me from somewhere. Marcelo had never thought of investing in anything but growing money. But the first time he set foot in a shelter with Clara, something inside him shifted. In that place with peeling walls and the smell of soup, the children first watched, frightened, then curious, as Marcelo entered with his suit still immaculate but his eyes open, unhurried, transparent. Clara was the first to crouch down to the children's level. She took the hand of one of them, dirty, shy, just as she herself had been not long ago. No one said a word. They didn't need to. It was a cramped room, beds lined up against the walls, broken toys scattered underfoot, an old radio playing softly. Marcelo sat next to Clara. You could see how uncomfortable he was, but he stayed put. He didn't let anyone pull his daughter away, didn't rush, didn't check his watch. A little girl climbed onto his lap. Marcelo froze for a moment, then tentatively put his arm around her. It was new to him, but it was new to her too. At that moment, Clara smiled at him. That smile was sunlight filtering into a childhood living room whose window had been shut for years and years. The news spread fast. Marcelo Bastos, the tough executive, was visiting shelters, sitting on the floor, playing with dolls, reading stories. He went further, announced a real, serious project, with paperwork, a budget, lawyers, the whole deal. But the way he described it was nothing like the old Marcelo. His speech was unsure, moved, his voice breaking at times. He talked about true wealth, about the emptiness he'd felt when all he cared about was numbers, about Clara's eyes when she knocked on his car window. He apologized again, looking into the eyes of all those children, as though he could embrace what he himself had ignored for so long. Clara became a symbol without even noticing. Wherever she went, she found a way to hug every boy and girl she passed. She brought toys, shared her snack, and always let slip a piece of advice that seemed meant for them, but for herself too. We should never give up, because someone can always come along and see our dream. At home, Marcelo was different. He was learning to listen again. Some days, he'd leave work early just to make it home in time to put Clara to bed. She still wanted stories, but now she asked about his childhood too. The two of them laughed together at forgotten tales, at little things from before everything went so wrong. One day, after it was all over, it rained nonstop. The smell of wet earth brought back bad memories for Clara. She grew quiet, stopped smiling, spent hours gazing out the window. Marcelo sat down beside her and didn't say anything. He just put his hand on hers. They stayed like that, in silence, listening to the rain. Marcelo didn't ask. He simply stayed, showing her that now, truly, she'd never have to go through that alone again. With time, the mansion became less of a castle and more of a real home. Books strewn across the floor, sticky notes on the fridge with reminders scribbled by hand. Cakes in the oven, the smell of fresh bread, toys everywhere. Marcelo no longer cared about mess. He even learned to play hopscotch, to dance to cheesy music in the living room. People started showing up, wanting to hear their story. Marcelo met their eyes now. He no longer looked away. He listened to their pain, carried part of it in his chest. He was no longer just the absent-minded millionaire, but a living, breathing man, and a hope that was beyond price. Love, he told anyone who cared to listen, is the only investment that never fails. And like that, one miracle became thousands. Children found refuge, were fed, given warm beds, given someone they could call family, because Marcelo and Clara showed it wasn't just about money, but about seeing, about welcoming, about loving without fear. And with every new smile, Marcelo knew he would never again be that empty man. He and Clara, together forever and beyond.